Hello. I have a number of train videos out, and I wanted to add to those with a three-part documentary that I'm calling A Train Odyssey. It's not really all that tremendous, but I'm having fun with the name. The first part deals with how I typically get to the Amtrak trains from my home, and the second part deals with the Amtrak Cardinal train, which runs from Chicago to points east. I took it as far as Washington, D.C., but it does go further. And the third part deals with a commuter train along the Eastern Corridor, also run by Amtrak. So 3 different types of trains in a 3-part video. This is part 2, the Amtrak Cardinal, with service in my case from Chicago Union Station to Washington, D.C. Union Station.
And we're instructed to go to a particular track. It's a pretty short distance from the Metropolitan Lounge, but there's still some walking involved through the South Concourse in this case. So unlike the trains I've done videos on before, the Cardinal, which is my train today, is using Viewliner type cars instead of superliner cars, so it's only a single layer car. I have to figure out which car number I'm going to. So I'm in car 5001. These are all coach cars here. This is evidenced by the fact that there's no upper level windows on them. Viewliner cars are up ahead, or sleeper cars, that is. So once in the vestibule of the train, we snake around here, past the full-size rooms,
and then down the narrower central hallway to the roomettes. As soon as I was in my roomette, my car attendant came by to introduce himself and take my reservation for the first dinner, which was only going to be within a half an hour of the time I boarded the train. And I had barely enough time to unpack a few essentials from my suitcase, set up my radio scanner and my GPS before it was time to go to dinner, and the train pulled out of the station.
So precisely at 5:45, the train started rolling out of Union Station. Okay.
doing me wrong when we're right, right?
I know that's right. How you doing? Good to see you. Welcome. Have you traveled before?
No, we came from San Francisco out. Okay. Back out. United States back out.
Okay. So you go down here for this configuration?
No, from San Francisco.
Okay. Can you show me?
How you doing, sir? Welcome aboard.
This is where a lot of the tracks curve and go westward, but we're not doing that this time. We're continuing to go south. But we're also not going to go along Lake Michigan. We're going to go down along the Illinois-Indiana state line for a while before finally angling down towards Indianapolis. So I thought I'd start out with a small tour of the Viewliner car. Unlike the Superliner car, the Viewliner car's vestibule is at the end of the car instead of the middle. So we enter here, and there is of course a opposing door on the other side depending which side the station is on. And there's the connection to the next car. And this is a nice touch I haven't seen before. There's actually the car number represented in the big LED display. I'm in car 5001. And we've got the foot and hand type push buttons to automatically open the door. Coming in, we're first met with the secondary door to the handicapped room, or accessible room as it's called, which is the first bedroom. Then we jog to the side and go past. And these are all the regular bedrooms on the side. So these are the full-size bedrooms. The accessible room is on my left. And then there's a couple of bedrooms here on the left. And this is what the regular bedroom looks like. So this is typical of the regular bedroom. It has a connecting door to the opposite side. If you turn it into a suite, the room itself is only designed to accommodate 2 people. It has an upper and a lower window, a small seat opposing a large seat, So we got this wide sofa here where you could lay down, or you could have several people sit side by side, as many as 4 I think, or an adult could sit here and a child could sleep next to them. All sorts of options. It's a little different from the layout in a superliner bedroom. So the opposing seat is a smaller seat, but it's still pretty decent. And then you've got your toilet in here with a built-in shower. So you both use the toilet and do the shower in the same room. This is just like a full bedroom or a regular bedroom on a superliner. And then again, you've got your small sink and mirror and so on here. Again, very similar to the superliner bedrooms. Moving back into the hallway, we've gone past the 2 bedrooms. I think there's just the 2 bedrooms and then the handicapped / accessible room at the far end. And I believe some versions of the train have another bedroom or 2 besides this, but this particular one only has these 2. So then we jog to the side and the aisle goes down the middle. I like this touch here. It tells you which way you have to go to get to the dining car. It's saying go the other way to get to the dining car, or go this way to get to the dining car. On the Amtrak website, it shows a floor plan for the Viewliner trains, and it shows, I think, 12 roomettes and 4 regular bedrooms and 1 handicap bedroom. But on this train, as I mentioned, there's 2 fewer regular bedrooms, and I think there are 16 roomettes, 8 on each side.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Hi. How you doing?
That was the conductor checking tickets just there. He already checked me once I was in the full-size bedroom shooting the video. Anyway, so here is the Viewliner version of the Roomet, contrasting from the superliner that I've done in my previous videos. Now it's a little dark in here at the moment because I have the lights turned off. So I'm going to turn the lights on, get a little more illumination in here, and I'll go over the features of the room. So once again, this is a single level car, and that means that you can have the ceiling a bit higher than you could in a superliner, where they have to keep the ceilings pretty low in order to have 2 stories worth of or 2 levels to the car. This is still a shorter car, and it has to be in order to go under some of the lower bridges and shorter tunnels on the eastern routes. It's also, I think, an older design from the superliner, and I've been told and I've read that Amtrak is renovating their Viewliner fleet to be more like the superliners. I'm not sure if that's true, but it would potentially mean getting rid of the toilets in each room and making them more like the communal toilets that you'd find on an airplane or on a superliner train. Personally, I would welcome that. I'd rather have more room in the roomette and not have the toilet in there, but some people may view that differently. Anyhow, so I still have a fairly nice wide seat. It's almost identical to that on the superliner, except it's not quite as wide. The width of the room is the same, and the length of the room is the same. The window on the side is practically identical, and there are some minor differences in how the venting is done and so on, but you do end up with this pull-out table, which, just like the superliner, has a built-in chess or checkers board and the caution not to sit on it. this is a heavier built table than the one on the Superliners, which I think is good, but otherwise it's functionally the same. And as with the other trains, the checkers or chess pieces are not included to the best of my knowledge. You'd have to bring those playing pieces yourself. Once again, I always bring my scanner on the train. I have it programmed based on the frequencies given on the Amtrak online website. And as usual, I have my automotive GPS on the window so I can see where we are at any given time. I also bring my road atlas so that I can see a larger picture of where we are and where we're going. There's a nice set of safety instructions, and there's also the abbreviated route sheet that shows just the schedule, so you know when you're going to be coming to each town if the train is at least more or less on schedule. I don't see the actual route sheet in here, but it may be tacked in here somewhere. I printed my own out from Amtrak's website before I came. I'll turn up the squelch a little bit, cut down some of that noise. Okay, so what else? So the seats still recline. You can go into a reclined mode, where you can slouch back a little bit more, or you can go into the more or less upright mode, which still has a slight recline to it. Certainly very comfortable. You can put your feet up. I think unlike the Superliner, if you put your feet up and you have a partner in the room, there's going to be very little room to put your feet up next to them. That's one thing I like about the Superliner, is that the seats are that much wider that you can easily cross feet with the opposing passengers and be very comfortable and not feel squeezed in. But what you get for that narrower width seat is, again, the toilet. Now you've got your own little built-in toilet here, and it's very much like an airline type. There's a button on the wall. And luckily it's at a bit of an angle, so it's a little easier to get your tush in there. Again, if you're in here with another passenger, somebody that's traveling with you, they're going to have to get up and leave every time you want to use the bathroom, unless you're extremely friendly with each other. That's another advantage, I think, of the Superliner, is that you don't have to shoo the other person out every time you want to do something. It just makes more sense to me to just go down the hall and use the common bathrooms. Another nice thing that's in here, although I'd only use it, you know, in the morning and the evening, is the fold-down sink. And this sink is, again, very much like an airline one, but you've got your hot and cold, and also some, it says ice water. I'm not sure if it's actually cold or not. Oh, maybe that's soap. I don't know. It says ice water. I have no idea what they mean by that. I think this is a soap dispenser, but no soap is coming out of it on mine. I just get the cold and the hot water. And it appears that there's no way to get warm water unless you mix them in the basin. When you tip, there's a nice light reminding you that the sink is down, if you didn't already know that just by looking at it. And then when you tip the sink back up, the drain's in the back, so everything just runs out before the sink is completely folded. There's a small mirror, and there's a light above the mirror, or a light switch above the mirror and a light, and there's another switch for the same thing right here. So you can turn that light on from either location. I'm not going to try to reach the upper one, but I think that would be very useful for somebody in the upper bunk to use to turn that light on without having to come way down here. And that could be useful perhaps as a reading light, perhaps as just a way to illuminate the way down when you're stepping down. And this ledge here is part of the ladder, if you will, for the upper bunk. as is the toilet seat cover. So that's your 1-step, 2-step, and you're up. The unlike the Superliner, the bed just lowers down. It doesn't fold down from the ceiling. It's always there, and all you have to do is move the lever and it's counterbalanced. Just rides down on these rails. All the linens and the blanket and so on are already up there. You just lower it down and it's ready to go. There's even a pillow ready to go. So you don't really need the porter to do this, or I'm sorry, the car attendant. But if you want them to, they will. And mine has already offered to do it while I'm at dinner tonight, which is practically now. I'm going to go get dinner in the dining car and continue this video later on. But I should point out that there's this upper level window, so whoever's in the upper bunk can see out. So I'm making my way to the dining car at this point.
Huh? You ain't got to worry. All I'm gonna do is go call Cody and call police. You ain't got to worry. I ain't got to fight. I ain't got to fuss. I ain't got to do nothing. They gonna do everything for me. They say, Dennis, if you have a nigga, call.
So this is one more. I think this is the last one. This is a business class car here, but the other half of the car has got some tables on it, which can be used by anybody in the sleeper cars.
It's disgusting.
Well, now that we've laid waste to the table and my dining companions have departed, it's time to take my cookie and my tea and get out of here.
I took
So let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and the shower rooms. So this is what the shower room looks like on a Viewliner. A little area for towels, a little seat, a shower stall, and a little changing area, and a bag to put the wet towels into. Very similar to what's on a Superliner, except you don't have to go downstairs for it. So the car attendant has lowered the bed for me as promised. That's great. Just as with the superliners, you've got privacy curtains and you've also got this little lock here which you hold in place with this other little piece. It's perfectly secure on the inside, but there's nothing you can do to lock it once you're outside your room. So when you're out of your room, the door is unlocked. You always have to bear that in mind. And its curtain is held in place by Velcro. And I think, yeah, there's a Velcro tab here, which engages with a Velcro tab there to keep the smaller curtain from sliding out of the way. So now I've got this bed down here that's pretty low, and I'd like to get more light in here, but it's being blocked by the bed. So, reorganize my suitcase and turn on the, see, it's barely visible here, but there we go. Okay, where were we? My GPS shut off while I was out for some reason. I think the power's tripped a little bit while I was in the dining car, and that may have happened on the whole train. Anyway, so very similar to the superliner trains. I've already covered the sink and the toilet and the layout of the car. The bed's been made up, and
south on the main on the pair at Shelby. Clear on the pair Shelby.
So where was I? Okay, yes. One thing that amazes me about these cars on the Viewliner is how many controls there are. You've got over each seat but you've got a master light control. There's one over each seat, and then there's one right here inside the door, and then I think there's, seems like there's another one somewhere. Anyway, you can control the master room light by turning it just to a night light or turning it off. Oops. Or turning it on for full. So there's 3 settings, and you can make the same selections to go to a night light or to have nothing, or to have the full light, and again, that can be also changed from that location. I wanted to say there's probably a way to do it from up here somewhere. Oh yes, there is. That's the 4th place. There's one that's reachable from the upper bed. So other room details. There is a reading light that's unique to the upper berth, and there's the light up there. There isn't a closet in these rooms, but there is a hook and a couple hangers they give you. You can hang things right against the wall. There is I don't know, it looks like 4 different places where air can come out. This may be an air return, actually. But there's a upper level fan with an off, low, medium, and high. On here it doesn't seem to be doing anything. Wonder if it does anything on the lower one. That one does something. So you've got individual fan controls for the upper and lower, and it looks like it should turn and adjust, but it doesn't. It's a locked vent. There is an attendant call button with a little buzzer and a light. There is an individual thermostat, which I'm not sure if it really does anything. Mine seems to be turned to nothing, so I'm not going to mess with it. Already mentioned that you've got this wall light, which is this one over the seat. They call that the wall light. Then you also have over here, over each seat, the reading light, which can be turned on and off with a switch here. So that's individual. There's a small compartment for little rolls of Kleenex that they've got here. I think that's Kleenex. It says personal tissue. Guess you could use it for all sorts of things. It may be the toilet paper too. I'm guessing that, let's see, there's 2 of them in there. There's a trash container. That is a good point, because when I've been in these cars before, there was actually a toilet paper dispenser, and I don't see that here. That must have been a different version of the car. So I guess here that is it. I may have to ask the room attendant just to make sure, but yeah, there's another roll of it up here. I think that's got to be what it's intended to be. There's little drinking cups for the water.
CSX Equipment Defect Detector. Milepost 54.1.
So I think there are no other features to this room that I have not gotten around to covering yet. I think it'll be amusing at this time to try climbing up into the upper bunk.
CSX Equipment Defect Detector. Milepost 54.1. No defects. No defects. Total axle 3/6. End of transmission.
No defects.
And you'll hear those reports coming in on any of the Amtrak trains. It's an automatic system that records defects on the train as the train goes over, and then radios them out so the engineer can hear them. It counts the number of axles and whether there's any over temperatures that might indicate a failing bearing or something like that. So it's a pretty good diagnostic that everything's still rolling well back on the train. So as far as getting into the upper bunk, you use the toilet for the first step. And then you've got this upper level here, again with a small blanket, curtains for the windows, set of pillows, and a safety strap so you don't roll out on rough tracks in the middle of the night when you're sleeping. There's also a pouch up here you can put your glasses and stuff. And oh yeah, one thing I forgot to mention. If you can manage to get it up here, there's this cubby hole. It's like, I don't know, about 2.5 feet wide or so, a little bit more than a foot tall, and a couple feet deep. It's basically big enough for a suitcase, but you have to get it over this bar here. So, I don't know, I'm not too keen on putting anything in it. I think you could stick some small objects up here, but if you tried to stick a suitcase here, it could be a bit of a problem. So that is an extra storage space that you do not have on a Superliner. There's no such thing. This is basically over the aisle here. So anyway, I was going to get up here and see how it goes. So there's a handle on the wall, and there's enough room here to pull yourself up. That's not too bad. Now I'm 5'8", and I've got about 4 inches between my head and the wall, and I don't know what there is. There's about a foot at the other end between my feet and the other wall, maybe 10 inches. So probably about 6.5 feet, 6 feet, 8 inches, somewhere in that area of actual length in the room, all of which can be used for the bed. So I think there's no problem with tall people sleeping here. On the Superliner, the beds are obstructed by the extra cushion depth, which is the top of the seat headrests, and that cuts into that space. So I think on a Superliner, the maximum bed length, whether it's upper or lower, ends up being just a little bit less than 6 feet. So that's one perk for having the Viewliner. I think you get, at least on the upper bunk, you get to have a slightly larger person sleep without having to bend their legs. And again, you're not going to fall out. There's the strap here. And again, if it's daylight and you just want to lay here and read or something, you'd have a pretty good view out your own window without being involved with trying to look out the lower window. And on a Superliner, there is a much smaller space for the upper bunk. It's only just barely tall enough to crawl into. It's very much like a coffin. I've crawled up in there, but I've never actually slept there. Whereas here, if I lay in the bed, I've got enough room to reach up to the ceiling with my hand outstretched. That's quite a bit of headroom. And so that's definitely a perk for this type of car. On the other hand, the Viewliners are not used on the long haul trips, so you're probably never going to be in one of these for more than one night, where on a long train like the Texas Eagle, you can spend, if you take it all the way from Chicago to Los Angeles, you could be in there 3 nights in a row. And I think having a claustrophobic upper bunk, if you're sleeping in it, might be a little less enticing 3 times in a row. So now I'm up here. How do you get down? That is the question. Seems like a long way down to the steps, but I'm a limber person. There's a very strong bar here for the luggage and another strong bar here. And it's just a matter of stepping down onto the intermediate ledge and then down onto the toilet and then down onto the floor. Not too bad. Storage space, just like the Superliner. There's room under the seats to put things like purses, small bags, maybe a notebook computer bag, shoes for sure. And at night you can stick your small suitcase here, and otherwise you could put it on the toilet and so on to get it out of the way. As with the Superliner, there is one outlet. Actually, on the Superliner it is a single outlet,
We're here on the Viewliner. It's a duplex outlet, which is nice. I always bring my power strip and keep it chock full of stuff. I always have the power pack for my radio scanner, the power pack for my GPS unit, the charger for my mobile phone, and then the charger for my battery for my camera that I'm always using. And actually on these trips I bring two cameras. I bring a small one for incidental shooting and then a big one for the most scenic stuff. And so my particular outlet strip isn't big enough to have two chargers and all this other stuff plugged into it. But you still need to have an outlet strip if you're going to plug in more than one or two things, because that's all there is on the wall. Now here's a small heads up on the Superliner. The outlet is against the window and there's a nice flat ledge that you can lay your outlet strip on and all your chargers, and they just stay out of the way, and they're right up against the window, which is where things like a radio scanner and a GPS would go. Inconveniently, the outlet on the Viewliner is over by the aisle side of the room, so your outlet strip cord or whatever cord you've got has got to cross over the room. And if anybody is seated in the opposite seat, it's going to be going across their lap, or they're going to be sitting on it. So if you're going to ride in a Viewliner, I'd recommend getting an extension cord or an outlet strip with a longer cord so it can be snaked around in some inconspicuous way. There's a gap here, for example. You could tuck a cord coming from the outlet and kind of run it along here and get it over towards the ledge, but then the ledge itself is sloped, so anything you put on is just going to fall off on the floor. So that's a bit of a disadvantage. You could probably find a way to tuck it up here, hook it behind the window release lever, whatever, and get it over here, and maybe have your outlet strip over here, as long as you have a long enough cord to go all the way around. In my case, I'm traveling alone on this trip, so I just put it in the opposing seat. I'm not going to use that seat, and it's fine. I wanted to show how dark the room can get at night. Right now, I've got all the lights turned off except for the night light up there on the ceiling, and it's pretty dark. The lower bunk is, you can hardly see anything. There's just slight light coming through the curtains from the hallway, but it's pretty well blacked out. It is nighttime out here, so you might be able to see one or two little lights wherever you are out in the countryside, but that's about it. And if I don't like even that night light, I can turn even that off, and then the only source of light in the room is the little pilot light for the outlet. And if you have your GPS turned on, of course, that's making some light. There is one more thing that I didn't mention. In addition to these vents on the wall, which don't really seem to blow very much air even if they're going like crazy, that's why I turned it down a little bit, because it's kind of a loud fan. There's a much more aggressive fan blowing air up out of these vents on the side. There's quite a lot of air coming up there. I don't much like that because it's cold air, and if you're sitting here reading, it's just kind of blowing up under your chin. Luckily, they do give you a sliding lever. There's one on each side, so each passenger in here can have their own. But it's a sliding lever that you slide over and it cuts off the vent, so nothing can come out. Or you can kind of crack it halfway and get a little air coming out. So that's a good thing. Without that, it would be kind of miserable in here. The other one is way back there where it's hard to see on the video. I'm turning that one off because it's driving me nuts. And of course you do get your own curtains from the outside. Inconveniently, they're tied in at the top and the bottom, which makes them not slide very well.
I found it's kind of I much prefer the superliner's approach of not being tied down on the bottom. Then if you've got things like your GPS and so on, the curtain can just hang over it. Here, it's going to insist on being tied at the top and the bottom, and you can kind of get it to go around something like the GPS because there's these elastic straps on the bottom. So it'll kind of stretch out over things, but I've found when I was messing with these before that the whole curtain is a pain in the butt to move. It's not a good design. Much prefer those on the super liners. It's just a whole lot easier to deal with. But yes, you can close the curtains. Luckily in my case, because this is a Viewliner, I don't need to keep these curtains closed at night because I'm not sleeping down here. I'm using the upper bunk. And when I'm on the upper bunk, nobody can see in, so I can just leave them open.
35 and 645 are megabucks. I do that megabucks. I'm gonna see where the Kevin is going. If he's not, then before they get out, I'm gonna call Andy and I'm gonna tell her I'll go. Roger that. Looks like we're gonna have a little over a minute when we're here there for Joel.
Right. Sounds like the engineer talking about stopping in this town we're coming into.
3 more. 2 more, 50.
Oh, this is Rensselaer, Indiana.
1 more, 50. That will do.
So we just stopped, although you can't see it, at the Rensselaer station.
Yeah, we got a 25 coming up, 73.7 and 72.8. Station work fleet door secured. It's Friday Rensselaer. In on the clear. 743 is clear. Got a 25 coming up, 737. 738. Here we go. Clear.
I like when you can hear the engineers and the conductors conversing about when they're going to come into a station or leave a station. And the moment you hear the engineer indicate he's getting ready to roll, you hear the toots from the train horn, and it really gives you a much broader perspective on what's going on with the train than just sitting in your room. Anyway, I thought since there's a nice truck stop. Anyway, I thought since we're on the Amtrak Cardinal, I would take this opportunity to outline more or less how the train goes. And I'm going to see if I can do it without getting too many shadows in the way here. So we're starting from Chicago. The train came down and went more or less along the Indiana-Illinois border part way, and then it crosses over near Lafayette. It goes to Rensselaer, and then it slopes down at an angle and comes to Indianapolis, and then it continues on to Cincinnati, which is on the Ohio River. At that point, it follows the Ohio River along the bottom of Ohio and the border of Kentucky, and it continues down to the junction of West Virginia, and then it doesn't follow, I think it doesn't follow right along the bottom of West Virginia. I believe it cuts on some smaller rivers just a little bit inboard of that along the bottom of West Virginia through all sorts of picturesque Appalachian towns, and then it finally makes its way through the Appalachians proper here and comes in on Western Virginia, and then makes its way up diagonally to Washington, D.C. That's as far as I'm going, but the train itself continues on, I think, all the way to New York. I think that's its terminus. So you could take the Capital Limited, which goes from Chicago directly across the top of Indiana and Ohio. I believe it goes down through Pittsburgh and then makes a beeline to Washington, D.C. And that's a much shorter train. That's not an evening and a day like the Cardinal is. It's something you can do in probably about half the time, and it's a straight shot, whereas the Cardinal is following river valleys all the way from Cincinnati, practically all the way over into the middle of Virginia. So if you zoom in on the maps and follow the route, it's a very circuitous route. It winds and curves, snakes around wherever the rivers are going. So the actual route looks like it's 2 or 3 times in miles what you would think it would be as the crow flies. And that should be part of its appeal, and that's one reason why I'm taking it instead of another train, just for the scenic opportunities I expect to see tomorrow on the daytime part of the run, as it's a full day from 5 in the morning whenever the sun rises till about 6:30 when it pulls into Washington. You get a full day there of pretty scenic views outside of the train. Now, unfortunately, I'm on the right side of the train, and most of the visitors are going to be on the left side of the train. So I'm hoping to be able to spend some time in the business class car that's between the sleeper cars and the dining car. We walk through it on the way to the diner, and there are several tables there, and if they're not completely taken up by other passengers, I should be able to spend time in there and at least see out both sides, get some video in. I'm hoping to kind of camp out there for part of tomorrow. Anyway, that's the route that the train's going to follow. It's in the big picture, it's Chicago diagonally down here, and then following it around and coming back up to Washington. And it's about bedtime, but I thought I would give some sort of idea what kind of space there is when you're standing up next to the upper bunk in this roomette. So I've got my outstretched hand at my elbow, and that's a person of average size. That's the width I've got. Or if you want to look at it, I can fit in here with my shoulders. See if I can get enough light in there. With my shoulders scrunched in. Certainly not with my shoulders normally. It's too tight for that. But it is enough to stand up at least. So it's 9:30 at night, and we are where? I don't know what town we're in. Be nice if the GPS told me. That's interesting. I think it would do a better job of that. Yeah, nothing like a GPS display that doesn't tell you what town you're in, huh? Good going, Garmin. I swear the older models were much better than the newer ones. They show you all sorts of garbage you don't want to see and don't show you what you do want to see.
PO 50, okay, to depart Crawfordsville. No, we're delayed in block. Last signal was approach.
So the radio makes it sound like we're in Crawfordsville, Indiana.
Approach, delayed in the block. Here we go.
So, regardless of my GPS, we're in Crawfordsville, which is where? I have no idea where Crawfordsville is. Oh, here it is. Yeah, it's not from Lafayette, it's a bit further west. It's right here, south of Lafayette and east of Danville, on the way down to there. So that's as far as we've come in in 4 hours, we've only made it from Chicago down to Crawfordsville. Not very impressive. Now I can see why it's going to take all night to get a little bit past Cincinnati over here, down past Indianapolis, and get over to Cincinnati, and sometime in the wee hours we should be, I think, a bit east of Cincinnati. So, a long night, I think.
Mark, I just can't win on this gas price.
It's pretty clear that the frequencies I got from Amtrak online are correct, because I've been getting plenty of train communication on my scanner. But I have to turn it off now or I won't be able to sleep. Well, a couple of more thoughts before I hit the sack. And speaking only for the upper berth of this Viewliner, I'm accustomed with the superliners I take more often to having that nice ledge next to the bed and a wider bed that I can lay things like my Kindle after I read it without actually having to stow it, and keeping my glasses and cell phone and stuff like that right next to me as I sleep. And there's really no good place for that when you're in the upper berth on a Viewliner. There is that little pouch over on the wall that you can, in theory, stick some stuff in. The pockets don't look all that reliable, but it's probably usable. I do plan to put my glasses in there at the very least. And the other thing I notice is that it is a great thing that they provide a full suite of light controls from this location. So I could sit here and say, well, I'm done with the room lights, and turn those off. Just keep the night light going, or not. And then kill the reading light when I'm tired of it. Have a pretty dark room. But I'm not done for the night. Anyway, video to be continued in the morning. Well, it's about 6 o'clock in the morning. Just finished my shower. I always like to get up a little bit early to make sure I don't have to wait for the shower and all the other people getting up. So instead of waiting for the room attendant, sorry, car attendant, I'm just raising the bed up myself, get it out of the way. A couple things I want to point out very quickly is that, at least with me, when I take a shower, I always have to blow my nose right afterwards. And I was reminded, since I hadn't taken a Viewliner in a while, that the only place I could blow my nose was at the opposite end of the car in my room. I was still used to having the bathrooms and the shower close together in the superliners. Just a small consideration. And the other thing is that the shower in this particular Viewliner is about a quarter the size of the one in the last superliner I was in. Pretty close quarters, but it still worked. And although I've mentioned this in my other videos on Amtrak travel, it's always important to bring yourself a set of flip-flops or shower shoes or whatever, so that you can have something on your feet walking around on the train to get to the shower room. You're not allowed to walk barefoot on the train, and gives you a little extra traction perhaps when you're in the shower. And also, if you're concerned about things like athlete's feet and so on, or athlete's foot, this would give you some protection. So remember to bring those flip-flops. I hate them normally, but they work for things like this. And now that it's just about 6 in the morning, we just went through the town of Maysville, which I'm guessing is on the Ohio River, although my GPS isn't naming the river. I think that's the Ohio River.
DFX equipment defect detector. Milepost 593.6.
Another thing I'm not too fond of when the tiny little sink is in your room is, first off, you can't get at the sink unless you kneel on the toilet because it's too far back. So you're always leaning forward. My back hates that, and my knees hate it if I kneel on the toilet. So it's another reason why I prefer to have the stand-up, more spacious, more normal layout of the bathroom that you find on the superliners. Anyway, one has to deal with it without complaining too much, but it is a consideration. If you're going to travel and you have back, knee, other physical issues, be aware of that. And also, I prefer to use warm running water instead of having to slop water out of a sink for washing or shaving or what have you in the same sink that you just brushed your teeth in or whatever else you put in there. And it never did get washed really, so, you know, it's just not what you would have at home, so it's another thing to keep in mind. So, some additional thoughts now that I'm fully awake. And these thoughts are on the Viewliner specifically, not on the route I'm on or anything else, just on the Viewliners. It had been quite a while since I'd last traveled on one, and I'd really forgotten a lot of the details. So I already mentioned that the showers are smaller, but that's no problem. I think a major consideration is just how much more careful you have to be when you're using the sink or the toilet. And that's just because it is in such close proximity to everything else in your room. The faucets are pressurized, they don't just flow out, so they kind of splash when they operate, and the water tends to go other places than just the basin. It especially goes onto the edge of the basin, which doesn't go into the drain when you tip the sink up, and it tends to run into other places. It gets all over, and you pretty much need to use the hand towels they gave you to mop off the edge of the sink before you tip it up, or there's going to be some of a mess. And in addition, you know, if you're trying to use the sink and another person's in the room, if they're sitting in the seat next to the sink, they're going to get splashed. So that's another thing that really says either use these rooms most successfully when you're the only person in the room, or the other person's probably going to have to get out when you are using the sink and certainly the toilet. They do give you these little miniature flattened toilet paper rolls with no core in them. There's not a lot of paper on those, so if your person uses a lot of paper, you might want to bring your own or ask the car attendant for more before you get situated in your room.
Equipment defect detector. Milepost 551.3.
And, of course, gentlemen, if you're a stander when you urinate...
TSX equipment defect detector. Milepost 551.3. No defect. Total axle 3.6. And level 8. Clear South Portsmouth, no defect. Circuit 5 deep. 5 deep.
Alright, so much for that. Back to this. Gentlemen, if you're standing when you urinate, the best answer is don't. Just think about all the people who've stood in your room when they're urinating and how much of that has gotten onto the upholstery of the seat next to the toilet, and you know, they're not shampooing those seats after every trip, so that's a major reason why I really dislike having the toilets in the rooms. Now you contrast with the way they used to do it on the old Vista liners, or whatever they called them, Vista domes, whatever. The old style that they used to operate on many of these routes, which are now, as far as I know, only used by Via Rail in Canada on their trains. On those, the situation is different. The Roomets have a sink and a toilet, but it is on the opposite side of the room from the only seat in a Roomet. There's single person occupancy Roomettes. So if there is any splashing or anything there, it only gets over in that area of the car. It's not anywhere where you'd normally occupy in the car. That's a much better system. Here they've just tried to jam too much stuff into a small area. Some people may find it convenient. I think it's a little bit gross. So just bear that in mind, and you know, try to do everybody else a favor and yourself. Keep in mind, spray, splash, whatever, from the sink or the toilet when you're using them. So it's about 6:30 in the morning, and the GPS shows me near Portsmouth and Wheelersburg. We've come down the Ohio River, and
10:50, we can depart. Signal indication.
along the edge of Kentucky, we've got to Portsmouth here, which is at the confluence of the Ohio and the station is on the south side of the river, so it's not really in Portsmouth, but it probably counts. So we're starting to get into the area where it should get more scenic, but at 6:30 in the morning, as you can see, it's just totally dark as night. No hint of any light yet, so the diner opens at 6:30, and that's where I'm gonna go, and hopefully it'll be light by the time I finish breakfast. Oh yes, and I forgot to mention that it's been a long time since I've been in an upper bunk, and I'm not even sure if I've ever slept all night in an upper bunk or not in my train travels. If it was a long time ago, and I can't remember clearly, but I did spend all night in the upper bunk on this Viewliner, and other than the track being very rough, so there's lots of bouncing around, it did not present a problem for me, and I slept pretty well. So that was a success, but I did have a bit of trouble coming down because I forgot to put my glasses on before I came down, and was having trouble seeing where the handholds were and so on. And then I forgot that when I was standing on the toilet that I wasn't on the floor yet, and almost took a fall. Blame that on age or something, but just a consideration. If you're less than nimble or so on, you might want to avoid the upper bunks. Business class car has is a small kitchenette with liquid refreshments that the passengers in sleeper cars or business class cars can just help themselves to.
yeah, yeah. I live on my building.
Why you don't want to be a documentary? It's not good. You're trying to get nothing bad about this. Oh, you